What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good Monday morning, victory Monday morning, a big victory Monday, because it was a big win, or at the very least on the scoreboard. I don't know if beating a beat-up Saints team is a big win, but winning by 31 points is certainly a big win, and if you're a Seahawks fan today, you're probably doing pretty good, and if you're a Seattle sports fan in general, you're probably doing really good. I know that I am, so there's a lot to talk about with regards to the Seahawks and what they did yesterday, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that for the rest of the week between now and the Thursday game. It's actually going to be a pretty packed schedule over the next few days because I got a lot of stuff to get out before that Thursday night game, because I'm sure no one's really going to be interested in the Saints game once the Cardinals game is here. But I'm going to go ahead and lead the day off with a video that on the surface has nothing to do with the Seahawks. And it may not make a lot of sense to some people why I'm talking about something like this, because this has nothing to do with us as the Seahawks and their fans, but it does. And I think some people will get that. I think some people will understand why this does have something to do with us. I want to talk about not the current Seahawks, but I want to talk about an element of the prior Seahawks, the recent past Seahawks. And what I'm talking about is, generally speaking, I'd say that the person most associated with this would be Pete Carroll, the Pete Carroll era of Seahawks football. But more specifically, there's one particular player that is very heavily associated with that era, the starting quarterback for most of that time, the starting quarterback for 10 years in Seattle. I want to talk a little bit about him and just talk about what we need as Seahawks fans, because if you're like me, and if you are a Seahawks fan that isn't very young, you probably remember fairly vividly the Russell Wilson era. And by Russell Wilson era, I just mean the 10 years where he was the starter here. I know that he wasn't the best player on the team all of those 10 years, but there was a window where he was, and he certainly defined the team, even if he wasn't the best part of it at all points. And during that 10-year window, we won a Super Bowl, we went to another, we had other successful seasons with playoff wins, we had a quarterback that competed for most valuable player awards and first team all pros and made Pro Bowls and was generally considered to be among the best quarterbacks in the league. So as a Seahawks fan that recalls all that very well, this has to stop. And this is kind of a unique situation, which is why I'm calling it out. If this was something that happened to every once great quarterback, then I wouldn't necessarily have a lot to say about it, but this circumstance feels so unique, and I was thinking about it last night while watching the Sunday night game, and I don't know how many of you guys watched the Sunday night game. If you didn't, you can honestly just look at the box score and get a pretty good idea of how that game went for our old quarterback, Russell Wilson. But honestly, I don't even know if the numbers do it justice how bad he was. He completes barely half his passes, 160 yards on 32 attempts, 2 picks, 9 points, 2 sacks taken. Gets nothing going to his star number 1 receiver, Malik Neighbors, and has the whole stadium chanting, "We want Dart," pretty early in that game, in a game that ended up being winnable for his Giants, by the way. Let's pause 60 seconds. I'll tell you about Sleeper. Before I go any further into this, I want to tell you a little bit about my friends over at Sleeper. Have you heard about the Sleeper app? It is the best way to experience and connect over sports together with other users. It's a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. Go download the app now. You can celebrate and chat on games in real time with others. You can get the fastest scores, news, and alerts, all that right at your fingertips. And of course, you can play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So you can enjoy sports the way they were meant to be, together. Download the #1 sports app today. And when you go, use promo code SBN, that is SBN, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. So check out Sleeper today. Don't forget promo code SBN. All right, welcome back. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that last night was one of the worst games of Russell Wilson's career. Maybe it wasn't the worst, but in terms of just being completely ineffective and not able to produce and making amateur boneheaded rookie mistakes like throwing it out of bounds through the goalposts on 4th down or the intentional grounding on 1st and goal, it's been it was certainly a low point in his career, and I think we all know where this is going. I don't know when Russell Wilson will get benched for Jackson Dart, but it is going to happen at some point this season. Maybe it'll take a month or two, maybe it'll happen this week, but it's going to happen. And bottom line is, whenever that happens, please let that be the end. I don't want to see Russell Wilson come back next year playing quarterback for the... Who's left at this point? The New York Jets. I don't want to see him coming back playing for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't want to see him coming back playing for the New Orleans Saints. I don't want to see any of that. I want this to be over. This is possibly, at this point, the worst starting quarterback in football. And it's just this very unique situation where you have a quarterback that was once special. I know he never won MVP, but he competed for MVP a few times. He was in the MVP race a few times. He did make second-team All-Pro once. Made the Pro Bowl year after year after year. Had elite numbers year after year after year. I'm not saying he was ever the best quarterback in the league, but he was in the conversation with 3 or 4 guys relatively consistently in his prime, to now basically be a bottom-level journeyman. The only difference between him and the typical journeyman is that journeymen typically are willing to be backups and Russell Wilson isn't. But basically, Russell Wilson tries to, each offseason, find the 1 or 2 or 3 teams that is so destitute at the quarterback position, Russell Wilson is the best they can do, and then he gets to latch on and play with them for a little bit. And it always ends badly. Notice that Russell Wilson has left the last, really, I'd say, 3 fan bases. I'm not going to include Seattle, but Denver, Pittsburgh, and now we're getting there with New York. When he leaves, pretty much all the fans can't stand him. Pretty much everybody in the fan base just cannot wait to run him out the door. I'm not going to say Seattle did, although you could argue that, because I think things were a lot more split and a lot more divisive at that time. But Denver, Pittsburgh, and now New York, you can see people turned on him, and by the end, they were basically packing his bags for him. And it'd be one thing if Russell Wilson was like Vinny Testaverde, or he was like a Donovan McNabb, or Drew Bledsoe, or even a Joe Flacco, that kind of a quarterback, then it'd be kind of like whatever. Okay, make your money. Go put up your volume stats. Hang around as long as you can. But Russell Wilson should be better than that. And as someone who associates most of my positive Seahawks memories with him starting at quarterback, I don't want to see this version of Russell Wilson anymore. I looked. I actually went through the record books for NFL quarterbacks. It's not like he's chasing any records. It's not like he's hanging on so he can break a record, some massive volume stat record that has stood for a while, that he's just a handful of games away from getting to, or maybe even half a season or 3/4 of a season away from breaking. Like, completions, no, he's not even top 50. Well, actually, he's top 15 after last night. He could get to like 14, maybe 13, but he's not going to get into the top 10. He's almost 900 completions behind Eli Manning. He's not going to get there, so he doesn't have that. Pass attempts, even less so. He's 20th in passing attempts. He could get a little bit higher, but he's nowhere near the top 10. Not even remotely close. Passing yards, he's 15th. He could bump up past Tarkenton with a couple more games, but that's probably about it. He's not sniffing the top 10, not unless he plays for another 5 years. Passing touchdowns, he's 12th. Maybe if he plays out the season, he could get to 11th, but he's not getting to top 10. So what's he chasing, right? Is he chasing a ring? If he's chasing a ring, then why is he on the Giants? I'll tell you the record he could break. After yesterday, he is now the 3rd most sacked quarterback of all time. And he only needs to be sacked another 11 times or 12 times to pass Aaron Rodgers. Now, Rodgers, he's obviously still playing, so Wilson will have to do some work to catch up to him. But this is actually the record he could break. And I don't know if this is the record that you want. I don't know if you want to be the quarterback that got sacked 600 times in your career, but that's where he's headed if he keeps playing. And the thing is, I'm thinking about these other great quarterbacks, these other, let's call them legendary quarterbacks. And I don't know if Russell Wilson is a legendary quarterback, but I think about how they went out. And some of them went out sad. They did. But it always made sense. It always felt like they had the right to go out a little bit sad because they didn't linger for too long after it became clear the lights were out. Peyton Manning, last season of his career was bad, but the year before that, he actually played mostly fine. He looked good. The Broncos won 12 games, and he came back because there was unfinished business. And as much as Peyton Manning did not have a good season that year, the Broncos won the Super Bowl that year. And whatever little you think of the way Peyton Manning played that season, they actually leaned on him pretty heavily to get that Super Bowl win. And there was nobody better in the fourth quarter of close games that year. So, yeah, he was bad. He was washed up, but still had value. And he didn't hang around after winning the Super Bowl. He didn't come back to try to repeat. He didn't come back to try to eke out another season. No, he called it quits. He was like, oh, good thing I got my Super Bowl out of this crap season. I'm out. Tom Brady. Tom Brady, his last season wasn't very good, right? It fell off. Not his typical self, but the year before that, he was maybe the best quarterback in the league. Made every sense, made all the sense in the world for him to come back for one more season to see if he still had it. And he didn't. That Bucs team still made the playoffs, by the way. They only made it because of their terrible division, but they did make it. So even that wasn't that inexcusable. Brett Favre had one of the best seasons of his career in 2009. Threw the interception in the NFC title game. Felt like there was unfinished business, came back, and he had nothing left. But after that, guess what? He left. He retired after he realized that. Dan Marino won a playoff game in his final year as an NFL quarterback. Like these guys, sometimes they go out a little bit sad. Like all those guys I just mentioned, they were not the quarterbacks that they once were. But once they realized that, they escorted themselves out of the league pretty quickly and with some degree of honor. Even Eli Manning, as much as Eli Manning kind of really got dragged through the last few years of his career with very little team success and very little individual success, at least he stayed on the same team. At least he stuck it out with the Giants. And once they benched him, he was done. Right? Like, this is Russell Wilson team hopping, not even team hopping trying to ring chase or even chase like a deep playoff run. No, this is team hopping now at this point. When you go to the Giants, you're literally team hopping for no other reason than just, I want to keep playing. Like, there's no rings here. There's no team success here. You're going to the Giants to go 3-14 and pile up some more volume stats. That's it. It's because you'd rather do that than sign as a backup somewhere. And by the way, Russell Wilson shouldn't sign on to be a backup anywhere. He's got enough things going on in his life that he doesn't need to waste his time being a backup quarterback somewhere. That's not what I'm asking for. But I don't like watching this. I don't like watching him like this because, look, like last week, Russell Wilson had a monster game against the Cowboys. Last year, he had the monster game against the Bengals. Every now and then, yeah, Russell Wilson will run into a defense so bad and so incompetent, they cannot defend the one thing that he does well. But other than that, It's either this or it's just kind of a dead in the water game. Kind of like the first Giants game this year against Washington, where it's just kind of like no production. Yeah, it's not quite as viscerally ugly as something like last night, but it's just kind of lethargic and lackadaisical, and you punt, you punt, you punt, you punt, you punt until the game's over, and you've got somewhere between 6 to 16 points most of the time. So let that Cowboys game last week be like your last memory in the NFL, right? Let that moment where you threw for 450 yards and almost won, and I know you still didn't win, so it's not everything that you wanted, but let that be like your final moment in the NFL that people will really remember. Let that be like Matt Hasselbeck in his second to last game as a Seahawk, turning back the clock and destroying the Saints in that playoff game. Matt Hasselbeck had very little left at that point. He had a bad season that year. Go look at the numbers. Go watch him play. I remember he was a bad quarterback in 2010. But for one game in January against the Saints, he had it. And he went up and down the field on the Saints before Marshawn did the Beastquake. Everybody remembers the Beastquake. Not everybody remembers Matt Hasselbeck having one of the best games of his career. And then a couple weeks later, or actually a week later, he's playing the last game of his Seahawks career, goes on to be a backup. And he did a little bit of team bouncing too. And I know that some players do the team bouncing thing at the end of their career, but again, that's Matt Hasselbeck. Matt Hasselbeck was a good quarterback. He was a franchise quarterback for a little bit there. Kind of like guys like I mentioned earlier in this video, Drew Bledsoe, Vinny Testaverde. These guys, they had good moments, but it doesn't feel sacrilegious to see them slumming it as bottom 5 starting quarterbacks in the league at the end of their career. But with Russell Wilson, it just feels wrong. And this has been going on now for 4 years minimum. And you've had every opportunity to prove that you are still a good quarterback in this league. You worked through Nathaniel Hackett, Sean Payton, Arthur Smith, Mike Kafka, Brian Daboll, however you want to slice that up. You know, at a certain point, it's got to be you. It's got to be something that you're not doing. And I feel like these smart defenses, these even moderately intelligent defensive coordinators, they just kind of laugh at you because they know what you are. They know that you can't attack the middle of the field at all. So there's very little they have to defend, and they got you in a box. I think that Steve Spagnuolo last night was kind of just chuckling to himself all night, knowing this game's already over before it's even started because of this. Sorry this video is so long. I usually don't go this long with a video, but this is I don't know, this is starting to become a pretty frustrating thing as a Seahawks fan, right? You don't want to see, because whatever you think of Russell Wilson, and I know some people in my community, I know some people on my channel don't like him, and they still don't like him, and I kind of get why. He is clearly, and anybody who disagrees with this is just plain wrong, the greatest quarterback in Seahawks franchise history. And I don't know if he's going to make the Hall of Fame. I think you could make an argument that he's played himself out of the Hall of Fame. I think you can make an argument that there's no such thing as playing yourself out of the Hall of Fame. However you want to slice it, though, this is a legend of the game as far as Seahawks fans are concerned. This is a guy who will almost certainly be in the Ring of Honor. This is a guy who may have his jersey number retired. And this is a guy who may end up in the Hall of Fame and will be remembered by 95% of people as a Seahawk. And seeing him be this bad, be this inept, be this dependent on really one thing. There's only one thing that can happen when Russell Wilson takes the field for a football game. Either the other team will not play too high safety, or Russell Wilson won't be able to do anything. It's not fun. It's not fun. And if the Giants do let him play out the string, he's probably going to go like 3-14 this year. He's going to have a season that would put him in the bottom 5 of all starting quarterbacks in the NFL. He'll be down there with the Spencer Rattlers of the world and the, what's the guy? Justin Fieldses of the world, Joe Flacco. And it'd be one thing if this was the first time this was happening. It's not. I know that the last 2 years have been a little bit more debatable. But Russell Wilson has not really been a good starting quarterback since 2020, I would say. Maybe 2021, but even then it was like, I don't know if I'd call any of that good. So he's had more than enough opportunities to prove that he can revive his career. And every time he kind of starts to do something like the 5-game win streak in Denver or some of the good games he had in Pittsburgh, it fades very quickly and people forget about it very quickly, right? Like he won 5 games in a row for Denver. Denver fans were losing their minds. I remember this. 3 weeks later, pretty much every Denver fan just wanted him out the door. So this has been going on for a while now. And as someone who associates most of my positive Seahawks memories with watching him play, this isn't fun anymore. It's not fun watching him go out there and just not be able to get anything done and be one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. So for the good of your legacy, Russell Wilson, let this be it. Get benched at some point this year and retire. Sign your one-day deal with the Seahawks. Go do something else with your life. All right, long video, but had to talk about this for a while. And until Russell Wilson gets benched, that's probably the last video I'm going to make talking about him because there's nothing else to say. All right, everyone have a good rest of your day. More videos soon. Go Hawks.